Good morning, everybody. Here from the Temple of Silence, it's getting a bit darker now up here in the north, and I wonder if the the SAD syndrome is setting in. The seasonal affect disorder. Maybe one should place oneself under these grow lights and hope for the best. Anyway, we're at our 95th program here, and as we're reading through the book, we're on reading number 35, and it looks like we're on page 60. Yep, 67. Well, we're all lined up there now. Tomorrow there won't be any broadcast of any kind because I'm going to be over Hudson Bay, I guess, at the time that it has to be, and Tuija is away from computer capability. So I'll try, if I can, to be back on Sunday. By that time, I will have reached the United States. But we'll see whether that is really possible, because it will mean a night broadcast from Phoenix, and I'm not sure about the plane and other things, but just keep an eye open. Otherwise, we'll resume the next week. A little spotty, perhaps, because of the travels, but we'll resume the next week on the evening schedule, and the full moon in Sagittarius will be coming up, and also the pre-full moon webinar. So we will, excuse me, definitely be offering those, and when there's a little intermittency, we'll let you know. Well, let's just have a little alignment here. This picture of the egoic lotus, I guess it is really something to behold, and as the eye to see that begins to open, we begin to realize that there's a truer home for us than the personality. Of course, this isn't any kind of final location, final environment, or final point of tension, but it certainly is superior to the personality point of tension, into which it's so easy to subside. And we'll be working on some glamour today. There's just, the election is far from over in the United States, for those who are following it, and there are many issues of a very demanding kind arising in Britain at the moment, regarding I don't know what that is, but let's get rid of it. The Brexit, and I can't help but think that, given that Master R is the regent of both America and Europe, I cannot see how the breaking up of the European Union, or the fragmentation of states in the United States according to passionately held but limited ideals, can be on his agenda. The hierarchy is for unity and internationalism and cooperation, and yet there's a constant fighting based upon an irritated solar plexus. So maybe we'll deal with this glamour that has people fighting with each other all the time. It's called confused combat, instead of real cooperation. When the astral plane finally receives the love wisdom of the soul, and when these phantasmagoric forms are dissipated, it'll be a lot easier to bring about cooperation in the microcosm, and within groups, and between groups, between nations, and in humanity in general. right now, I'm afraid so many members of the human race are victims of their own ignorance, and that's not to exclude us. We have still plenty of ignorance, but having, what does they say, caught the tail of the dragon of light. At least we have the dragon of wisdom speaking to us. A master is called a minor dragon of wisdom, and the initiates are the serpents, and the planetary logos is the greater dragon of wisdom. And somehow we're in that aura um, where they do speak, and we hear the words and perhaps modify our point of view and our behavior. So let's just come together here, more than 20 of us this morning. And you can feel how the silence assists in that sense of unification. We're all in that point of tension that unites us, and maybe our geographical location is the least of our concerns, because meditation can unite people over time and space. And we have also the assist of the new technology, which brings us into the same room simultaneously. And so this is a service we undertake, and we offer the group to help carry out the approved methods of the master to use the technique of light to help rid the astral plane of its darkness and distortions. It's going to be a long battle, of course. But little efforts can make a big difference. Okay, friends, so we'll get into our reading. I just want to welcome you, Alexandra, Anne-Marie, Annette, Ariel, Jean-Pierre, Karen, Catherine, Leslie, Marianne, Martha, Natney, Nyenka, Olivia, Sam, Stacy, Suzanne, Vera, Zenaidi, and well, whoever else comes along. We make ourselves available. I was just reading, and we'll read together that we really do have to work on our personal glamours, if we can detect them, in order to be of use in this process of dissipating world glamour. But things are so serious that maybe without totally adequate training for any of us, we have to be used in the larger picture. And we have to believe in the effectiveness of these approved methods of the masters, um, and work with persistence as much as possible. And if, during the days, if you can spend even 5 minutes essentializing the meditation for the dissipation of personal glamour and use your own individual beam, as it were, um, it will be helpful. Of course, the problem with glamour is everybody else sees it, but the person who is afflicted has a little trouble seeing it. I'll just say this as we go along in the reading. Please make note of what you might want to discuss or reference. I know for some of you it's quite late, even 10 o'clock on the West Coast and 11 o'clock in the Mountain Central Time. I don't think we're going to have the privilege of having Central Time people and East Coast people, and certainly not South America. Um, but then there's always another week. And look, if the uh, unseemly hour of the broadcast is something you just can't make, then please go to, I guess it's going to be Makara right now, but also the Glamour programs will be on our YouTube channel, and to take them in, because you can benefit even if you haven't been there for the exact moment. You can benefit from the analysis and from the meditation, and with meditation we can overcome the factor of time. So do try to, when it's possible, take in the programs that you may have missed. We are reading through this wonderful book, and speaking of that, I want to say that last night, till the wee hours, I finally completed the commentaries on a treatise on white magic. So, and some of those programs are pretty long. I used to do like 1 hour programs, but I wanted to get this done before I came to the United States. So some of them are quite long programs, but there's about 125 programs there for you to study. It's just an amazing book. I just, so many of the foundational thoughts that are running through our minds when we study the Tibetan are coming from that book. And so it really is a book of training for the control of the astral body. It's a book of training for discipleship. And maybe in some of your groups, study groups, even if it's only 2 people, whatever, wherever 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I am, says the Christ to us. You can use these commentaries on the book and other books for a study group. And as I've said before, as you talk about things, it may be a slow process, but just sort of stop the tape. If you run into a subject that you think is of interest, just stop the program and discuss it and then go on. And I think I'm saying all this because I think we have to deepen our understanding of the blue books. A tremendous wealth has been given to us by the Tibetan, and as he says, more than you can ever absorb, he says, and he does mean that, So we can use these intense next 6.5 years along a threefold front of meditation, study, and service. And of course, it is also a service to clarify our own minds with respect to these matters and to rid ourselves of as many personal glamours as possible. So I just wanted to let you know that the complete series of those commentaries will be up soon, and already on YouTube and Makara. There's plenty to begin with if you are of a mind to do so. Right, here we are. 95, program 95, and reading number 35. And he's just rounding off here. He's ending his discussion of illusion Uh, so, as pointed out in the tabulation, that which dispels illusion and substitutes for it a true spiritual and infallible perception. Now, notice those words because they carry the note of the intuition. Is contemplation. So, contemplation uh, is really an entree uh, to the intuition. Contemplation, a contemplation necessarily carried out by the soul. Well, if it's carried out by the soul, what good does it do us? Except that we, in true contemplation, we slip into, I suppose, very subtle process, we slip into the soul's meditation. And we realize that we are participating in the meditation of a higher point of view. And it is, in a way, our own point of view. Are we the soul? We both are and are not. If you call the soul the solar angel or its kind of projection, the angel of the presence, then we are not the soul except in a very ultimate sense. But if you call the soul the projection of our own monad onto the higher mental plane and its mixture with that which the solar angel projects, then we are the soul. So, in fact, we will see that not only are we assisted by this higher being in contemplation, but we ourselves turn out to be the contemplating entity. And we begin to see as the soul sees. So he says here, perhaps some grasp of the sequence of development can be arrived at if you realize that the entire meditation process in its three major divisions can be divided as follows. Now note, he's basically saying that at different sections of the path, we meditate in different ways. If we're on the probationary path and we are the aspirant, our work is really to concentrate, the very foundation of all meditation, and our work is the devitalization and the dispersion of Maya, which is sort of an etheric physical phenomenon, and our astrological sign to govern this process is Leo. If we're on the, this is fluid, of course. You're never going to see anybody who's cut and dried and only in one place. There's a range of response. Some hours we may act like an aspirant, and other hours like a disciple, and so forth. The disciplic path, then we enter into meditation proper, which is more than concentration, and we work with the technique of light, and glamour is our target, not Maya. And this process is ruled by Virgo, a very discriminating sign. And remember that that fourth subplane of the mental plane bordering on soul consciousness is giving evidence of the quality of discrimination. So we all need that, and we can continue to develop it, even to tell the difference between reality, a deep reality, and illusion. And then finally, the initiate on the path of initiation, well, he enters the state of contemplation, and the target is illusion. And this is ruled by the sign Libra. And then what happens is there comes, Libra is equality, right? And there comes an equality between the observer and the observed, the meditator and the object of meditation. These two things are seen as one, and the consciousness is unified in a way that overcomes the subject-object dualism. And however you do it, I've been reading quite intently in Treatise on White Magic, and DK basically says, look, we're all headed for unity of consciousness, where the subject and the object are the same thing, and you realize that. Even if it's just 5 minutes a day, just try to sit yourself down, and whatever object is before you, or person or picture of somebody, or some maybe you can start with some living thing, try to find the equality of the subject-object dualism, which Descartes pretty well split that for us. I am the subject and there is the object, and never the two shall meet. But in occultism and mysticism, in the process of identification, not only do they meet, but they are recognized as the same thing. And then this could go on, but contemplation is enough. And may I suggest, I've never seen a better way of describing what contemplation is than to go into the book From Intellect to Intuition. And Alice Bailey really does a great job of explaining meditation and contemplation and the distinctions between them. And, whereas meditation may be somewhat clear to us, contemplation is oftentimes elusive because it's something that the soul does. So if it's something the soul does, how can I be doing it? Well, she explains that, I think, very, very well. So I would take a little time off and read that, read that chapter, because entering into contemplation at this time is very important for a unitive point of view about the environment and everything around us. We have to bring it all into a unity in our consciousness, and it's easier said than done. If you really follow contemplation to its roots or to its consummation, you're going to have a very high head center kind of experience, and it's going to be called, finally, samadhi. We read about this in the Hindu works, and it's a very fine synthetic perception. And then, of course, you know how the human mind is. They classify all these different types of samadhi, but we'd be quite fine to just even have one, even the lowest form of it. The above tabulation will suffice to show the connection between the meditation process as outlined and taught in the Arcane School and the problem which all of you have to face. He's talking, principally to his group of 9 people here that are undertaking to become the trained observers. They're working on the glamour problem, and they are, what are they using? The head center, the heart center, and the solar plexus. They're using the same 3 centers as the workers in the C group concerning the New World Religion. And that should tell us something. In other words, it's group 2 and group 6. And, look at the rays, 2 and 6, and how closely they are related to each other. The technique of the dispelling of illusion, as used by the initiate, and usually that's going to mean not the probationary initiate only, it's going to mean someone whose consciousness is unfolding around the 3rd initiation. That technique is contemplation. But now he becomes realistic. But of what use is it for me to discuss this with you if you are not initiate? And basically, the great majority of people that he was training were not initiate. Maybe Alice Bailey was a third degree initiate, and maybe Roberto Assagioli. I couldn't, in evaluating all that, I couldn't see any others that really were at that level, no matter what they might have thought. But contemplation, really, in its higher brackets, is an activity of the initiate. But nevertheless, it doesn't hurt to know about it and to work our way there. Would it profit you at all? He's asking himself. Or would it only satisfy your curiosity? You know, the path of occultism is not just for the curious. There's all kinds of motives involving curiosity, and they are not necessarily service motives at all. Would it profit you at all, or would it only satisfy your curiosity? And watch what he says here, if I outline for you, because this is a hint, if I outline for you the peculiar processes employed by a soul in contemplation for penetrating and through an act of the trained will and through some first ray formulas for dispelling it. Okay, so, obviously the soul on its own plane has some techniques that it uses. The first ray is involved, and there is the dispelling of illusion that is being effected by this higher agency in ourselves that we call the soul. There are formulas. There is a penetration into the illusion. There are ways of getting rid of it. But the Tibetan kind of comes up with that gloomy conclusion. Would it help? And he says, not that I can imagine. It wouldn't help you, really. You have another problem. So, but okay, still, according to Alice Bailey and the Tibetan, we can gradually enter the state of contemplation and leave much that is unknown to us to the soul and what it knows. Gradually, these formulas will belong to us as well when the time is right. But we can enter this meditation of the soul and share in the results of its techniques when we slip into the state of contemplation. And so I'm talking about contemplation as something that is largely beyond most of us. We're learning how to meditate under Virgo and to think with the seed thought and gather related thoughts, and light comes upon the seed thought. But this question of making the subject and the object the same thing is very, very subtle. I've always found in my own case, if I am at all successful, that the heart center is involved, and probably, although I don't know if I detect it, the heart in the head center is involved, because that involves, the heart center involves the Buddhic plane, at least that. And the heart and the head center, one of the even numbered planes above, and so forth. So probably there's an activation there, some heart activation in the contemplative attitude. The mystic, Evelyn Underhill, is someone that Alice Bailey references in this work, and she really knew what she was talking about. She obviously a transplanted mystic from the past who had really analyzed the process brilliantly. So it's worth going into, definitely. So anyway, he says, I shall therefore conclude my remarks on this point concerning illusion from the angle of your evolutionary status. What's the last thing that he's really saying? It's going to induce a certain humility in us. And it's kind of interesting that the sign of humility is Libra, and the sign of contemplation is Libra. An adjusted sense of right proportion is humility. And when you're assigning the signs to the different phases of meditation, Libra is assigned to contemplation and equality between the meditator and that upon which the meditator meditates. All right, so here's what he says. No holds barred. Basically, he says, look, glamour is your problem, as it is the problem of the world. Now, remember, he's writing back in the early 1930s, right? Some of you whose mental bodies are in the process of organizing, so maybe that was not everybody, may suffer somewhat from illusion. But your major problem as a group and as individuals is one of glamour. So if he's saying that to his group who became eventually accepted disciples under his care, then he's saying that to us also. Okay. Your major problem is glamour. Your field of living experience is on the higher levels of the astral plane. Is that true of us? Well, are we mentally focused most of the time, or is our normal field of living experience the higher astral plane? Not a bad thing, but we have to distinguish between mental focus, um, which is expected of the becoming disciple, and mental polarization, which is a higher state occurring if the temptations in the desert between the second and third initiation are successfully passed. So, well, we're getting ourselves into the mind more and more, but for these people, and maybe for us as a group, the higher astral plane is the focus. Your task is to overcome glamour, each in your individual lives and as a group, later to approach the arduous task of aiding and in the dispelling. There he uses an illusion word. It's usually dissipating, but let's say he's not always exact in the use of these words. And in dispelling of the world glamour. Of course, the world glamour in a way consists very much of illusions which have become glamours. This you may later be able to do. I don't know if they ever got that far, but different groups in the world these days do get that far. This you may be able to do if you submit to training and as individuals understand and master your personal glamours. This is not always a pleasant thing to find ourselves out. DK is amused as he says, some of you are almost happy or excited when you find yourself up against a glamour. It's it's not exactly the attitude that he would have us take, but it is an understandable human response. Just as soon as you have begun to do this, master your personal glamours, I can begin to use you as a group. But before you can work as a group, and before you can assist in the dissipation of the world glamour, you have to understand better and master more definitely the glamours and illusions of your personality. Now, he's just assuming these people have them. And if he assumes that they have them, then we have them. Okay? Because I guess the thing that we have to understand is that we are not so very different from the people who were gathered around him and who eventually became accepted disciples on the periphery of his ashram. He definitely knew these people. Now, I suppose he knows some of us too. I think somewhere he says that not one good deed, not one loving thought or kind expression or whatever, but goes noticed. It's never unnoticed. It goes noticed on the inner planes. The master notes it. So I do think, it's interesting, but it is said that every true aspirant is known to the Christ. And I think to myself, with the idea of true aspirant, I guess that means initiate of the first degree, if you're to be a true aspirant. And that means, as an initiate of the first degree, you have stood before the Christ as the initiator, and I imagine he has quite an amazing memory, and he knows who has come before him. So anyway, before I can begin to use you as a group and work at the dissipation of world glamour, you got to understand your own veils, fogs, miasmas, distortions. These things that keep us from really seeing reality as it is. The time has now come for me to help you deal more, and look at this word, deal more drastically with this problem of glamour, with a view to your destined group service and not with a view to your personal release. And there is the discrimination as to motive. You do remember that he pretty well said, look, you've made your way into my group not because of your burning desire to serve humanity, but because you want to be liberated, you want to be free, you want to be illumined, you want more for yourself of a higher spiritual nature, and it's not the loving orientation towards service of your fellow human beings which basically brought you here. So I guess we really have to assess carefully, what our motive might be. I ask you, he says, to set to work, therefore, with fresh courage and determination and with fresh understanding, and to carry on for another year. Okay, so some of the earliest of the disciples were kind of taken into the group around 1931. I don't know exactly when this was written, but I suspect in the 1930s. That's quite a while ago, isn't it? If you think of it, it's more than 80 years ago. And of course, still the need is just as great, and maybe we even realize in some respects greater. So fresh courage and determination, fresh understanding, and to carry on for another year. Will you bend your effort to the task? So he sometimes puts the question before his students so they can really make a very deliberate decision. For task it is. I wonder how many of us realize or how very tough the real road of occultism is. I think in the beginning, as novices, we enter with high enthusiasm and the anticipation of rapid attainment without too much difficulty. After all, we want to do it, so we'll do it. But later, it's a slog, and the road winds uphill all the way, as it is said in the poem. So we become more realistic about attainment and about time, and we're then coming into a better position to advise and guide the students that are a little younger than we are in terms of experience and who are coming along. A lot of he's quite amazing. Master DK has a certain quality of zeal. He's had in his development quite a lot of the sixth ray, even some humorous events in his life have connected with overzealousness. And I can't help but notice that after he's laid out all this information, more than we can ever assimilate, and it can just be maddening when you want to really get it all in order in your mind. Then he goes to the astral body, and then he gives these marvelous exhortations to a fuller cooperation, greater courage, all the high things which charge you. Oftentimes in a lodge of initiation, as they are reflected on the physical plane, the director will end up giving the candidate something called a charge. And it's meant to charge up the candidates so that whatever has been learned is taken into the world and expressed with full strength and enthusiasm. So Master Decay so often ends with what we call a charge, so we can get all charged up, and it's going to be needed. I'll tell you what, a new section is beginning, and I feel there's enough of your questions in general and in relation to these concluding thoughts about illusion, about training, about what our need really is, whether it's to conquer illusion or glamour, about contemplation, and the different stages of meditation. There's enough here that I don't have to go charging ahead into the next section, because I think it would be like a little bit of overload. And sometimes when you change subjects like that, it falls out of your mind what you were thinking about in the previous subject. So I would just as soon open the floor to our thoughts about these matters. And let's see, where are we? We've gone to page, not far, 69. The White Magic book has 640 pages in it. Really, and when you try to think your way and talk your way through such a book, but those are the, two great, maybe three great treatises that he wrote: the treatise on cosmic fire, a treatise on white magic, and the whole 5 volumes of a treatise on the 7 rays. And they are ponderous books. I wonder sometimes when we get associated with Master Decay's books, if we think, well, just being associated is enough. Oh, and you can't really learn about that and learn about that. There's just so much to assimilate. But of course, the greatest period of assimilation, or at least a very great period of assimilation, and we learn about this in Initiation Human and Solar, comes with extreme rapidity between the 3rd and the 4th initiation. So we have to be ready for that type of intake and that type of integration of the information into our spiritual approach. Now, the next meeting, and I'll probably, where will I be? I'll be at Thanksgiving with my family, and I'll try to find a way to take the time off from these family matters. It will be in the day because it will be in California, and carry on with this work. It's a nighttime, at least it's night here, and it's sometime in the day, probably 10 o'clock in the morning California time, and it'll be a lot easier for all of us to tune in. So here we are, and maybe a little less to consider today, but enough, before getting into this really interesting subject about our greatest need, which is to dissipate the glamour in which we, even we, and humanity constantly walk. I ran into a marvelous section in a treatise on white magic very near the end of the book, and it's all done in old commentary language about the man who's in the water, standing in the stream, standing on the shore with the stream running beneath his feet, and finally standing in the sun itself. Amazing symbolic language about how we divest ourselves of the illusions of the watery plane. There's much technical occultism there, but the use of that kind of language that he used for translating really gives access to the intuition. So sometime I would like to read that, but that would be, and have us think about it, even though it's from another book. It directly connects with the whole issue of glamour. Okay, friends, so now I'm on the lookout, and Michael will help me if I miss any of you who would like to say something, ask something, speak, or write, and I'll open up the, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do too. I'm going to, I always try to make this a little smaller because it being too big, we just don't see it. But of course, I never quite succeed because it doesn't show itself on one page in a way that we can actually take in, but it's better than nothing. Okay. There's something, I guess, 2 pages there. And maybe we can make out a few things, but it's easier to navigate 2 pages than 4. Okay, so your thoughts, your questions. Like I say, the whole field of occultism is open to our statements and questions. I'm not just going to confine it to this, but if you have questions regarding the reading of today, then okay, then we'll try to address those things.
Vera has raised her hand.
Right, okay, thank you, Michael. And Vera, hi, go ahead.
Hello, Michael.
Hi.
In the book Discipleship in the New Age, first part, we have our study group here, and yesterday on the page of 394, we were wrestling with one term, dark light.
Oh, yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
how can I guide my brothers on the way and with them find the secret of the dark light which reveals? How can I discover the agent which dispels illusion? Does it refer to monad? The dark light, we really didn't get far with that one.
Yes, the quick answer is yes. There is the dark light of the form, which has to be, it's kind of ruled by the sign Cancer. You see, if I were to go to, let me make another one of these so I don't have to lose the one I just used. And I would go here to, see, this is one definition here on page 3, maybe 29 or something like that. Close. So here it is, Cancer, the light within the form. This is the diffused light of substance itself, the dark light of matter, referred to in the secret doctrine. It is the light awaiting stimulation coming from the soul light. Now, that is kind of awakening the radiant potential of the substance of the vehicles, And when we have Vulcan operating, Vulcan is really a very illumining planet. It does something to matter, to make matter really radiate. See, Vulcan always wins over Mars eventually, and Mars has everything to do with kind of the native condition of the personality. Then Vulcan gets into the act and draws out the hidden radiance in the form. That is one example of the dark light. But there's another way to look at it. And let's see, where am I here? Where is this? Oh, here it is. Okay, there's another way to look at it. And the secret of the dark light is the secret of Shambhala. In other words, Shambhala is so, let us say, so intensely bright that the mechanism that we have to register light just draws a blank. It cannot deal with it. So remember what it says about Shambhala, the place of unfettered enlightenment. So let's call it by another name, unchained light, such excessive brilliance that to us it is darkness. Now, it lies ahead, but in the building of the Antikarana and in the entering of the antechamber to the monad, which is the spiritual triad, something of this more intense radiance is going to dawn upon us. And the agent, which is really going to dispel illusion, depends upon that approach to the monad through the Buddhic plane and through Buddhi. Buddhi, or intuition, or pure reason, is the thing that dispels illusion. So we are making our way toward the monad. And as we do, things get darker and darker because they're getting brighter and brighter. So it's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? But there's dark light below in the way that I tried to explain a little earlier, and there's dark light above. So it's kind of like the range of human perception with regard to light is bracketed in that way. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
In the race and the initiations by pure chance today, I found on page 174 that reference to darkness is pure spirit. So.
Okay, so here is, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong place here. Okay, and let's see if we can, darkness takes the place of light. There it is, darkness takes the place of light. The symbolism of light and darkness is used in the word, but the group know there is no color, only light, and then the darkness of Shambhala and the monad take the place of light. And in that darkness, oneness is experienced if we can deal with it. See, we are going progressively from color, which involves division and quality and the veiling of the essence. Color is actually a veil, he explains to us. Then we're going into the revelation of the unity, and then in the darkness, we are experiencing the oneness which shambolic awareness, or monadic awareness, if you will, gives to our consciousness. So obviously, this kind of darkness is not the darkness of ignorance in which we seem habitually to walk when we, talk about understanding occultism. Yes. So it is Shambhala and the monad. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very good. Thank you. You have, I don't know, Vera, maybe some fifth ray. You're quite specific about things. And I think we all have to have that. We all have to use that. There comes a time when, as Alice Beatty says, we have to have a well-stocked mind. And what it oftentimes means is that the mind gets filled with a lot of particulars relating to the science of occultism. Now, if they just stay as only that accumulation, rather than being synthesized, we have a lot on our hands. But the synthesizing of particulars into wholeness is our job, and that kind of unification of all the facts, it does come to us, and we have to put the many pieces together into a unified vision. So maybe, I'm sorry, maybe all of that can be done partially under the fifth ray, but it also helps to have third ray or second ray operating to assist in the synthesis of the particulars. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, further thoughts, friends, and be encouraged. All of this will be under your belt at some point, and much, much more. So if there's anything further that you would like to discuss. Okay, Veronique, let's see what we have here. Would deep dark holes in the universe be the equivalent of that light? Well, interesting thought. What I understand is that a dark hole, or maybe a light hole, they start talking about these things, is a transitional mechanism that gives us entree into the next higher level of vibration. I don't think there's anything ultimate about the dark holes that we deal with right now. I think they're very much dealing with time, space, and matter as we know it. But I think there are always going to be these funnels that lead into the next possible level of registration. So, and finally, for the very high initiate, there's going to be that kind of funnel that leads into the ineffable light of Shambhala, where right now we cannot fathom or appreciate or even register, but by the time we are initiates of the later fifth and early sixth degree, there'll be that funnel. We can call it a black hole if we want, that will take us into that new level of awareness. There are always these transitional mechanisms going from plane to plane to plane. And I think they are sort of the origin of the kind of black hole that we have experienced. And what I suspect about the kind of black hole with which we are more familiar is it's really a way onto the etheric plane. It's still quite physical, Our scientists are brilliant, okay, a little bit skeptical. There's Stephen Hawking's latest book. He passed away, but his book was waiting kind of to hit the press. The name of the book is There Is No God. Okay, there is no God. Well, you make these authoritative statements. I'm remembering something that I thought was pretty funny. Maybe it's a little bit macabre, It's like two people talking. Nietzsche talks and says, God is dead, and then there's a colon, Nietzsche. And then you have a following sentence, Nietzsche is dead, colon, God. And I thought, oh my goodness, some wit is really having fun. But there's so much we do not apprehend about transitions into higher planes. And in a way, the jewel in the lotus, in our egoic lotus, is such a transition point between the highest part of the higher mental plane, and the lowest point of the cosmic ethers. So there's a whole structure of these intake and egress points, the lowest of which we are coming into contact with now through the dark hole theories and all that. And I believe they exist all the way up, plane to plane, vibratory level to vibratory level. But we're not yet in the position. You know, we've heard about this thing in the near-death experience called the tunnel of light. I wonder if we shouldn't call it a funnel of light. There are the different funnels that DK seems to show, and a whole interior structure that awaits to be discovered by the initiate consciousness. Anyway, we make our way into ever higher frequencies of vibratory matter, and when we finally get to the highest level of Shambhala as found on the cosmic physical plane, we have entered something so brilliant, we just call it the sea of fire. And all I can say is, how do we approach shambolic light? We build the Antakarana, we become planetary in our thinking, we become impersonal in our thinking, we rise into a state of progressive oneness in which all things are revealed as in hearing in the one, and all we have to do is pass the sixth initiation and we are there. So it's going to take a few thousand years, whatever, and we're on our way to an immediate apprehension and appreciation of this unfettered enlightenment. But meanwhile, the instruments by which this unfettered enlightenment reaches humanity are the new esoteric schools. The great fourfold university, as it is discussed, and the various schools that Master DK says will be appearing in their preparatory and in their advanced categories. So when you get involved in that kind of process, you're on your way towards an ever-intensifying light. And I will not exclude the church organism and the Masonic organism. They are all part of that revelation. Okay, I hope that helps a little bit, Veronique. And yeah, that's what I have to say about it, you know.
It appears that you so illuminated the reading tonight that no one has questions.
Yes, well, you know, yeah, I really understand. I talk too much, you know, but no, I mean, you know, I'm so aware, you know, when I'm doing these commentaries on the books, Master DK has not only given us more than we can ever assimilate, but he has stratified his gift in such a way that it is a multi-level bestowal. And, you know, the old saying, those who have eyes to see, let them see. Those who have ears to hear, let them hear. He's writing for a bunch of different strata of development. And he's doing it all simultaneously. And so we get what we can get and what's aimed at us. And other people who maybe have a higher consciousness or whatever, they get what's aimed at them. And it's just such an outstanding gift. You know, I have in my mind that I really do want to be associated with the next installment that's supposed to begin in about 6.5 years, because I think the wonder of it is going to be amazing. Anyway, we do have a hand up here. And
both Alexandra and Vera had her hand raised.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I have Vera open, and then Alex, actually, I'm going to ask you something that's on a more practical level. But you may have a statement or comment about the material. So go ahead, Vera.
No, it's about our meditation, the dissipation of glamour. So when we do the meditation with you as a group, and so we all have different levels of understanding how the world is working and why things are happening for whatever reason. Now, even if we think that we understand, we are very likely off the mark in various degrees.
A little
Now,
bit.
how effective is our meditation if we don't really aim precisely at that glamour?
Mm-hmm.
I
think effective enough. Effective enough. So I mean, look, he's not expecting perfection. He's expecting an understanding, some understanding of the glamour, some understanding of what it takes away from humanity because it exists. And if maybe when the masters do similar meditations, they can work with a greater precision than we do. But I'm one of those sort of 70% people. I just think that we begin, and our growing understanding through the utilization of these meditations makes us ever more effective. So really, Vera, I have no doubts in that respect. I know that we meditate imperfectly, and I know that our understanding is variable. But in terms of the value of what we contribute, I'm quite convinced of it, and I think that's how DK operated. And I always say, well, I'll know more later, I'll be more effective later. Right now, I do what I can do. So that precision that you're looking for, it exists, but I don't expect that we have to have it, and I expect we'll grow into it. That's my attitude anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hope I have confidence in this. It's okay. And of course, sometimes you know how it is. We disciples, we might like to be perfect, and we can spend a lot of time seeing the ways in which we are not perfect, and that exercise of detecting our own imperfections can use a lot of time that we might put to more constructive uses. So I'm careful. I try to tread, the noble middle path here, the Libran path to an extent, and not go too far in one direction or too far in the other, to keep as balanced an approach as possible. Thank you for the question. Now, let's see. I'll tell you what, I'm going to, so Alexandra has something that we're all going to talk about, because I do want to talk a little bit about Brexit and all of that, Alex, because it's really in the news and it's really on my mind. And Suzanne says he expects dedication, perspiration, yeah, and not perfection. Yeah, the old saying that I wonder, it certainly was true of Thomas Edison. And when I was a kid, I heard it, and I said, "What? What is this? That genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration." And when you look at how Edison worked, I wonder who among us could stand such a schedule and such application. 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. So, the further I go in this, I see many imperfections. I see a lot of my own. I see them in other people. I don't trouble myself over them, because I know that eventually, following the right path as given to us, these liabilities will be corrected, will be healed, and we'll come into our full mastership at the fifth degree, and that's just the beginning. So there's an inevitability about it all. And as Alice Betty said, look, sit lightly in the saddle. I've seen people so sincere that they cripple themselves with joylessness. Of course, I probably was that way myself, and I recognize the earlier type of individual that I was. I was just that way. And I've learned a little bit about that sitting lightly in the saddle. It will all come to us, and with joy upon the way, it will come faster both to us and to those around us. So anyway, that's my perspective. All I can do is offer you my perspective, making no real claim for it. Okay, now look, what I'm going to do is kind of turn this over to Alex a little bit, who can, well, anybody who's following politics these days, especially in two of the countries that are supposed to be the two of the three in which the fate of humanity rests, will notice that attacks are underway and that lower types of consciousness have risen to positions where they just don't belong. And they're interfering, so it seems, with the destiny of the nations involved, even though they may be the bright light that finally shines sufficiently to show people in those countries the difference between the good and the bad. We sometimes need to go with Christ. I come to bring not peace, but the sword. And, I always say it's the sword of discrimination, but sometimes you need a really bright light to shine the sword of discrimination. Well, I mean, I'm mixing my metaphors here, but in order to really see the difference between the part of the nation which tends towards the expression of its soul and the part of the nation which is retrogressive and goes back to the bad old ways. So sometimes the very unpleasant view of what horrible things might be possible is needed to wake people up. So Alex, if you would go ahead and just give us a little bit of a rundown on the Brexit issue, I would appreciate that.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
You bet.
Good. Okay, and I also have internet connection, so if I suddenly disappear, I'll reappear.
Okay.
Hello, and thank you. I don't have a question. I have a comment. First of all, I want to thank you from my heart for these weekly gatherings, because I just find them such an inspiration. I'm sure everyone does. As we look out in to the world situation, to know that we can look in and do something. I like to quote the Dalai Lama, who always says, don't just pray, do something. And certainly dissipating our own glamours are the ultimate thing that we can do. And to know that that has an effect, and to actually see it has an effect. It has an effect within ourselves, and then we see it rippling out to the people around us. And also the fact that there now is such a network of light around the world, that we can always know that we're not alone in this work, and that we can join together at any time at crucial times like this. So that's mainly what I wanted to say. And also that you're going from the frying pan of Europe into the fire, literally. So wishing you a safe journey, and your whole family, as well.
Into the fire, yeah. My daughter's home is not
Are they all
far
right?
from the. Oh yeah, yeah. And these fires are gradually getting contained. And she's near the Woolsey fire, which has been so destructive in Malibu, but not so close. Basically all over California, there's this smoke plume, and it's said to be also blowing to the east, and rather unhealthy air. A lot of people will experience that. But
wow.
bad news from up there by the camp fire. So many more missing people are on the roster now. Around the Paradise area, and it seems that many of them are older people, and just couldn't get out, So it's going to be, by the time they finish with the investigation, it's going to be a horrific thing. And, what will it take to have us focus governmentally on these things in a really helpful manner? It's always easy to blame something irrelevant for uh, for events for which one is really responsible and doesn't want to be blamed. So you blame someone else for something else, like forest management or something. It's not that. It's not that. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, safe journey, and
Thank you.
I hope you can breathe deeply, and we'll all have you in mind and heart.
Thank you very much. I think
you're
I'll
there.
make sure I don't go outside running too much, right? Well, I don't think there's a big danger of that at the present moment. Okay, thank you, Alex. And we're following the Brexit issue very closely. I mean, we're not in England.
Put something in.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yep.
And that looks like
I've put 2 links in there, just in case anyone wants to. I think these are the 2 big questions now, which is what happens next, what's happening now, and what happens next. Yeah. And these 2 articles I've posted, which are the 2 links seem to be running together in the chat box. I think they're the best explanation at the moment. Things are coming out rapidly. Today's going to be another monumental day. But it's interesting that both sides of the Atlantic, these 2 great nations, or significant nations, according to DK, are both shaking at the moment. So there must be something in the astrology. But this is definitely, they're saying, one of the biggest political chaotic situations ever in the history of Britain. The first article lays out what the problem is with this so-called deal that the Prime Minister is offering the nation, and why everyone who's pro-Brexit or anti-Brexit is unhappy with it. And in summary, it's a worse deal than Britain actually has now as being within the Union, the European Union. So it's obviously a terrible situation. But what's going to happen next, I've outlined in the second article. There are 6 possible scenarios, and they're involving, possibly a leadership challenge, possibly a general election, possibly. I think the important thing for us is that this situation, which has been evolving for 2 years, which happened based on a lot of lies, incorrect information, and misguidance from various sources, and confusion on the part of the people. Now there's been a massive demand amongst all the intelligentsia, and there is a very great movement amongst the people to re-look at this. People did not know what they were voting for and what they were signing up for, and in fact this deal is not what they intended. Everyone knows it was an emotional issue which they weren't well informed about, and now the revolt against going forward with it, against the advice of all the academics, the Bank of England, the experts, the scientists, the revolt has really grown huge. It's finally reached the ears of the politicians. So once again, you have that gap between what the people want and what the government actually does. Exactly the same thing in America. You don't see the will of the people actually getting its voice within the government. So last night we had the surreal experience of watching the Prime Minister say over and over again what she's been saying for 2 years, which is that this is going ahead. Brexit is going ahead. This is the best deal for the people, and this is the will of the people. You people wanted this. You still want it, and we're going ahead with it. And of course, the outrage, there were protests going on outside of Westminster at the very time, and the outrage was tremendous in listening to this. And then of course she's got 7 resignations so far with it, because for people who are serious about Brexit, called hard Brexiters, this deal gives the EU too much power, and to the soft Brexiters or the Remainers, it's obvious to them that it is almost impossible for Great Britain to disentangle itself from the EU now, and it would be best to remain in and to reform the EU from within, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I don't know if that's a good explanation, but the fact is that when up until now, it's just been a negotiation stage, but now is the crunch time, because things have to be settled before Christmas, because Britain is due to leave the EU at the end of March. So time is of the essence. And what the protesters, I mean, there were nearly a million people. They say 700,000, but nearly a million people in London protesting this not long ago. What they're saying now is that it is so obvious that this is not a good thing, that the best scenario is to stop here and to have another referendum, not a referendum, but called a people's vote. In other words, the people get to vote on what this deal is that she's offered. So they didn't know what they were voting for before. So can they vote now that they know? It's all written. It's written out in 500 pages. I'm not sure anyone has read the 500 pages, but one of these articles will explain exactly what the problem is, what the UK would be tying itself into. It has to do with the customs union at the Irish border. It's quite complicated, but I think this article lays it out very simply. So there's no reason for this. There's no good reason for this deal to go forward. And the situation now is that it is up to the politicians in the House of Commons, which is like Congress, like one section of Congress, for them to vote down this deal and to suggest an alternative. And then that article lays out the alternatives. The hard Brexiters want to get rid of Theresa May, have a different prime minister, but the fact is they're saying she was incompetent. But the fact is, whoever you get in there, no one is going to be able to negotiate this. Yes. Because it's impossible. Because they've been trying for 2 years.
And I just want to say, I've got this chart up because, yes, it very helps very much. It's very clear. Thank you, Alex. The England, as part of the United Kingdom, is ruled by Aries, and that's where Uranus has been. But now Uranus moves into the personality sign of Great Britain, the entire United Kingdom, which is Taurus. And even before the end of, it's been there a bit, and it's caused this kind of initial turmoil. But before we even have to take that, I guess the end of March is an important time. And before that vote is reached or whatever happens then, even in the beginning of March, Uranus is going into the sign that rules the personality of the entire United Kingdom. And this is certainly a Uranian process that is occurring. It's all about transformation, but the chaos is there. And the possibility of making things worse, just as in the United States. So I think there's no question, both the United Kingdom and the United States have the second ray soul. It's the same ray as the Christ and as the soul of the planet, and it's a natural place to attack in a subtle way through the forces of retrogression. So this is a key decision before both, and in different ways. We have well, politics and all that. We have a very serious situation in England, yes, and we have immature psychology having an undue influence in the United States. It's a less mature nation, and those who are leading now are certainly not giving evidence of having any psychological maturity whatsoever. So anyway, this is a whole nother subject, and but as we meditate today on glamour, we have to have all these things in mind. So thank you, Alex, for that rundown. That's what I was hoping for, and it gives.
Can I just say quickly one more thing?
Yes, go ahead, Alex.
Can I just say quickly one more thing? That the reading Problems of Humanity, what arises is that whatever happens in the world, it does matter, and it matters to me. It's not just them over there, whether
Right,
it's Syria
exactly.
or it's California. And I'm only speaking about this because I'm living here and I'm informed about the events. But what's important now about these events here is this is the first opening ever since the referendum. The chaos that's happening now is the first opening for people with consciousness and awareness to actually interject some truth and positive thoughts into the situation, because now it's right now when it's falling apart, when there's so much confusion, that people of substance and people who meditate can give their attention to it and kind of insert that light in the darkness. So this is really a crucial moment.
Encouraging and demanding at the same time, and thank you for that. Karen, your question, it looks to me like Alex has here in the is it in the chat box? She has the links you're looking for. So Alex, are they in the chat box, or
I just sent it to everyone.
You put it. Okay, thank you, Michael. That's a big help. Okay,
thank you,
very
Michael.
good. All right, very good. Thank you, Alex, and I hope that answers it there for you, Karen. Michael has sent it out to everybody. Well, we have to keep our esoteric attention on these matters. The crisis points move from nation to nation, but now we've got two nations in which according to DK, the destiny of humanity is invested. So we know that this is serious business, and upon the decisions made, much will depend not only for the countries, but globally as well. All right, so let's see. I think, okay, Suzanne, we got yours, and Veronique, let's see what we have here. Yes, and we got yours. I think if it's okay with you, I'll just go ahead into our meditation. I think we have enough to think about now. And all of this, is because of the state of mind or the psychological state of millions of people who are still, I'm going to use that word again, immature in their understanding of the implications, the dynamics, the possibilities for good or for ill. We really have to increase human consciousness. Now, I hope I don't think I did. I think everybody is, yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and we will have our meditation. And, well, there's just so many things that need clarification. The clarification of consciousness. Okay, so here we go. And we'll come together and in the silence, and we'll allow that to help synthesize our efforts and make us together more effective. Until we get this sense of things that we're all one instrument working together to help clarify the immense problem of glamour on the astral plane. And, this is serious work and it needs protection, so let's use the long-armed cross, the cross of divinity, as we use the protective formula for the individuals and for the group as a whole. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light, I work, and from that point I never move. And we visualize the cross of light before each individual in the group and before the group as a whole. We now bring three lights together, the light of matter in the lower personality, the light of mind, and the light of the soul. We fuse these three lights as one light upon the place where we can, plane where we can reason and think, the mental plane. And the three lights are as if one. And we use this little mantra followed by the sacred word. The light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Then together as a group, we say as we visualize the searchlight turning on, arising out of the triple blended light, We're going to visualize our beam of revelation, our beam of dissipation is both. We're going to realize that that beam is turning on and we're going to use it. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. So we have access to the energy we need. Our beam is on. It's imagined as focused on the astral plane, and we will strengthen it further with spiritual will, bringing down that will from the highest sources so that the beam becomes in its own way invincible. From the sources of will to the beam, strengthening it, and we say this sentence: with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. We read of how the soul will help to dispel the illusion using first ray formulas. The first ray is involved here. The fifth ray of extreme luminescence is involved. And we're ready then. We have our instrument. We're ready to work. We're going to look at the way in which humanity is indeed a warring kingdom under the first part of the fourth ray. And it has to be transformed into a harmonious and cooperative kingdom. Because now millions, even billions, are fighting for personal advantage, selfishly. It's one of the traits which has to be developed. Selfishness has its purpose, but now we are really outliving it, and it can be our destruction if we don't deal with this selfish, frictional, self-serving approach based upon thinking that we are the personality. So we're just solidly in fire by friction as a race, and a little bit of reaching towards solar fire by some. But we have to change combat and friction this glamour of warfare, change it into cooperation. Okay, and so this glamour of selfish combat, I think those words capture it. Fighting for one's personal separative advantage. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of selfish combat for the sake of personal advantage. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour from affecting humanity. We do not fight for selfish advantage. We press ahead for soul quality to unify humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour of selfish combat for the sake of personal advantage. And now we will have 5 minutes of silence as we use, in our own way, protected by this cross of light and realizing the waste and the retardation that is caused by this selfish conflict based on personal advantage. When we realize the retardation in humanity, we will work to dissipate this glamour arising from fighting for the rights of that which one is not. Okay, we'll go into that People are fighting for the rights of their little personal self. It's lower Leo in conflict with Libra, um, where justice, fairness, impersonality, truth can prevail in the higher expression of Libra. The sun of selfishness, there is a lower sun, falls in the sign Libra, and it can be put away as we look for the truth which represents the will, the spiritual will, Libra, of all, the good of all, the fact of the will of the people, and not the manipulative forcing of circumstances by a privileged few. So justice and truth have to prevail over this selfish, aggressive attempt to have things come out your way, your personal way, and all the lying that's involved. And we see how the glamours we've been dealing with are all related to each other. We don't care about principles as much as we care about our own personal advantage, and our vision is distorted and we are biased in favor of what our desire body wants. This is the condition of humanity, and people are fighting in this way instead of cooperating within the light of truth. So as these very frictional events are occurring, especially in the United Kingdom and in America, let's really look for the light of truth, cooperation of men and women of goodwill in the light of truth, and not a jockeying for the success of selfishness. So let the unity and cooperation of the soul at least unite those people who are of goodwill and illumined mind to come together as a force and negate this retrogressive selfishness. And let those clouds, veils, fogs, mists be dissipated so that the sun of unity and cooperation and truth shines forth. Okay, we withdraw our beam back to the mental plane. The triple light is one, ready to send it forth again as a group to work even just a little to make things clearer, better, brighter, and more reflective of the soul of humanity. Let's keep working inwardly, and we will sound the Om 3 times to affirm that in this field of Maya, glamour, illusion, there has been even a little bit of progress. Okay, friends, we will thank you for your work. We will continue, and probably will be successful most weeks. But when traveling responsibilities arise, then we'll have to let you know or have someone fill in if Tuija and I cannot make it. But Olivia, Tuija, and I certainly invite you to be as present as you can in this ongoing process, which it can do some good. So thank you, and nothing tomorrow, Saturday, at least from us. There may be other things. We have quite a webinar and broadcast schedule. And then let's see if on the Sunday, attracting money for hierarchical purposes, if we can offer you anything, and if things settle down from the travels enough for us to do that. So thank you for your presence. Thank you, Michael, for your assistance behind the scenes here. And have a good day. And let's work on these crises so that the powers we represent can find through us a conduit to reach and improve the situations. Okay, lots of love, many blessings, and we'll see you here before long. Thank you, and bye-bye.